Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
How you doing?
Also on my lap right now is Garrus, my kitty cat. He's here for the podcast. Give me some moral support.
Of course, named after the famous horror director Mick Garris.
No, spelled differently and everything.
No,
Absolutely madman.
I think that's
No. Mass Effect character. Thank you very much. How dare you? So
maybe.
Yes, this is a horror movie podcast. Every week we get together, we talk about horror films. This episode, we are talking about Girl on the Third Floor, which stars CM Punk, famous wrestler, in a starring role. And yeah, so we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers, of course. We'll give you the premise of the film. The premise of the film is simply that CM Punk and his new wife, or not new wife, but him and his wife, they've bought a new house. We find out throughout the course of the film why they need a sort of fresh start, but they've bought this new house, and he shows up early on his own to renovate it and sort of fix it up and do all these various other things around the house. He encounters supernatural things going on. A mysterious girl, the titular girl, who's actually a woman for the record. It's not like a young person. She like starts to talk to him and kind of tries to seduce him and that kind of thing. The movie, the movie is a lot more sexual than I think I was predicting. I'll just say that. Let's just say the house itself. You know how some horror movies, like the house will be like, oh, it's on an ancient, burial ground, or it's built, out of a prison or something like that, so all the ghosts of the prison are there. The house in this movie used to be a whorehouse. So keep that in mind when we talk about what sort of supernatural ongoings happens to happen in this motion picture.
Yeah.
So, with that said, Tim, how do you feel about Girl on the Third Floor?
I wanted to like it more than I ultimately did. I think it's an interesting premise, and I think there's actually some like really cool special effects in it. Ultimately, I just don't think the story ends up coming together. My cat's trying to like lay on the computer. And I don't know much about wrestling. I liked it as a kid, but I haven't watched it in a long time. So I don't know anything about CM Punk. I thought I've heard like people I know like him, so I don't know, I'm sure he's like a cool guy or something. But I'm sorry, I think he's just horribly miscast for this role. I don't think he's like the best actor. I don't want to get to like, oh, he sucks or anything, but like, even like that aside, like his character is supposed to be, I don't know, like some type of like a banker or like an accountant or something. And it's just, I'm sorry, it's just like a little unbelievable. I don't know if that's like mean, but it seemed kind of strange. But I mean, with all that stuff aside, though, like I don't want to go like super negative or anything, because I will give it a positive and say I was like interested throughout the whole movie. Like I never got bored and wanted it to end. Like I think there's definitely a lot of problems, but I did want to like keep watching. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to find out what happened and everything. So I'll give it a little bit of credit for that. But yeah, ultimately it was not the best for sure.
I feel like you're a bit more positive than you should be on this. This movie is, I'll give it this. I was laughing a lot. The supernatural stuff that kind of comes up, all the little events, the paranormal activities, if you will, that pop up, are relatively entertaining. Not necessarily always because they're good, admittedly, but because they're silly enough that they elicit a response out of me.
Yeah, I don't know if I would full on say this is like a horror comedy, but it seems like it gets close at times. Like it definitely, I don't know if it's intentional, but it seemed like, they were playing up the comedy, now and again.
Maybe a little bit. I think CM Punk is horrible in this movie. Like I every time he was in a conversation with someone, I just had a hard time believing anything he was saying. And he's not the only bad actor in the movie either. it's not that everyone in the movie is terrible, but there's definitely some side characters who were really bad. There's at one point there's like a lawyer who comes to see him, and I thought every line that came out of the lawyer's mouth was really bad. There's like the old woman neighbor who I didn't think was very good either. There's a lot of kind of, you know, like the mum from Tommy Wiseau kind of style of line delivery. You know, the mum from Tommy Wiseau, the mum from The Room. You know what I mean? The mum, at least his mum. There's a lot of that type of delivery for me in this. It just feels kind of stilted.
So it's just like, like the way people don't talk in real life. It's like, you know, if we start a sentence like, well, Pete, as the co-host of, you know, Screams After Midnight, which is a podcast that we do, you understand that.
Yeah, it's never that overt, but like the movie constantly felt like the acting was just an afterthought.
Sure.
Or people were trying really hard, and you were like, "Oh, bless them for trying," but this is terrible. And I'm not necessarily blaming it on the actors. The director might be at fault. Matt, when I mentioned to Matt, because Matt's a big fan of CM Punk, I said, "Oh, he's terrible in this movie." He's like, "Oh, it was intentional because the director wanted like a Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead sort of approach," and I'm like, but his character doesn't fit that at all. His character is thoroughly unlikable, like from the get go. There's nothing. There
is like a weird Evil Dead vibe to it, but not in a like good way. Like it seems like they were intentionally ripping stuff off, like to the point where, you know, I think towards the end of the movie, it just looks like he's dressed like Ash. Like he's wearing like a long, like, you know, like denim shirt and like brown pants. So it's like it looks like they're really trying hard to go for that. But I don't know. Have you? I mean, you know more about wrestling than I do. I mean, have you seen CM Punk in other stuff? Is he at least good in other things? Or
I know he was in the Rabid remake, but I didn't see that yet. We never get around to doing that in the show. I know he's going to be in this director's next movie, so the director liked working with him. So that's a fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, he felt just everything. Every line felt really forced to me. Like he was. It felt like someone trying to prove they were an actor. But
it feels like someone acting versus like an actual like living character.
Yes.
Like you can tell he's like reading lines, and I don't know. I hate to say it because he seems like a cool dude, but like because like you said, like I know Matt really likes him, and I feel like I've heard, you know, people on podcasts like sing his praises or anything. So I don't want to be like, screw this guy, he sucks. But yeah, I'm sorry, I just was not good in this movie, I thought.
Yeah, so that kind of sucked. What I will say is that a lot of the practical effects for the various like supernatural things that happen, the gross out stuff, the effects on that stuff did typically look pretty good. The violence tended to look pretty good. There's a couple of cool moments with that stuff. Honestly though, like for me, this kind of came like it wasn't completely unsalvageable because I was laughing a lot. So at the very least, the ridiculous nature of the of the hijinks, we'll call them, at least gave me something to laugh about. Cat, you just clawed me as you jumped off. But like overall though, I can't really. It kind of it feels like it belongs like on the shelf next to that movie we did a couple of years ago called The Black Room, which was the sex demon, and then maybe next to that zombie movie in the strip club called Peelers. Like I feel like this is like a set of movies that are all of a sort of typical quality, all with a kind of a raunchier side to them that all just kind of feel like they belong together. And
wow,
yeah, that's what it is. And it's
I could see him, I guess, because of the content being grouped with those, but I think. And again, I'm not saying this is like a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it was at least a lot better than those movies. I thought those were pretty bad.
Okay. I was feeling, and what I thought was weird is that everything about the hauntings is all like disgustingly sexual, but when actual sex happens, they go out of their way to like avoid showing boobs like in a scene, and it really stuck out to me. I'm like, and it's not that I want to see the boobs. I'm just sitting there thinking like, you have been like overtly disgusting with like fluids and so much stuff up until this point, and yet you're just not. You're refusing to show some nipples. Maybe it's because the actress didn't want to, which is fair enough. But it felt weird. It felt like a weird thing to be like this head first into the sex stuff the whole movie. Then no, we can't show boobs in this. We have to avoid it, since boobs are usually the first sort of barrier to like cross over when it comes to that kind of stuff. So.
Sure. Yeah, boobs are the first barrier. That's right.
Let's put that on a t-shirt, Tim. Boobs are the first barrier. So
that doesn't sound problematic at all. Wearing a shirt that says that. Hey, well, then you should thank me because you got plenty of boobs in one of the other movies we watched this weekend.
did we?
Oh yeah, it's a pivotal plot point in let's say the fourth movie we watched, you could say.
That wasn't plenty of boobs. There was one pair of boobs in that whole movie. What are you talking about?
But it was a very important part.
It was an important part. If anything, it was the most contrived reason ever for someone to take their top off.
Well, people will find out what we're talking about in like 7 episodes. Or...
Nah, it may already be out before this.
Okay.
Just because we were recording it in this order, it doesn't mean they go out in this order.
I have no idea.
Yes. Just roll with the punches, Tim. Roll with the punches.
Okay.
So it's not a good movie. I will say there's enough funny things that happen that kind of made it relatively entertaining to watch with people. Because I watched this on stream with an audience, and that made it definitely a bit more entertaining, having everyone react to all the weird stuff. But I think if I was watching this on my own, I'd probably have been pretty bored for a lot of it.
Okay.
All right. That's it. No hot takes from Terry. I
didn't watch this by myself, so I can't confirm that.
Okay. Did the wife enjoy it?
Yeah, she liked it.
Oh. I bet she did. So that I think we'll go into spoilers from here out. Just be warned. A lot of disgusting stuff in the movie. That's all I'm going to say. A lot of disgusting stuff. But so full spoilers out for the movie. I'll take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. At the time of recording, these always change month to month. But thank you to David Short, Alison M. Fordyce, Cindy Palacios, Tyler Hess, and Talking Superman. Thank you to you guys for being Patreon producers. That means they're producers at $20 and up tier, but you can support us for as little as $1 per month over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. For that $1 you get a bonus exclusive episode once per month. There's a whole back catalogue now of about 15 episodes, so you get access to all those for your $1. The $5 tier you get access to a vote once per month, as well as all of the movie review episodes of streams one day early. So go and have a look and see if you're interested, and help keep all the content coming. But let's move on to spoilers for Girl on the Third Floor. So a while ago, speaking of bonus movies, actually, last year one of the bonus movies we did for Patreon was a movie called Incubus, and one of my favorite lines out of that movie was the doctor, after analyzing a victim of the sex demon or the sex monster, was he came out and said, after studying the victim, he went, "Just an incredible amount of sperm."
I forgot about that.
And I was thinking about that line a lot in this movie, because there was so much. It just cuts to shots of like wall sockets, and there's like jizz coming out of the wall sockets. And of course, the highlight of all this, the favorite, is the shower scene. I think, right, where CM Punk goes to have a shower, and it looks like it's kind of blocked, and I'm like, "Don't turn it on." It looks like this is going to spray him with jizz. And would you believe it? He gets sprayed with jizz. And what I thought was weird is that he never questions the fact that all this jizz is like, kind of fresh. it's all gooey and stuff. I'm like, jizz kind of goes crusty and hard relatively quickly. Like, why is all this jizz fresh?
I mean, he's probably not thinking it's jizz though. He probably thinks like, oh, it's some weird like sewage or something. Like, I think you got something weird coming out of your house. That's not your first thought, but I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Oh,
the first thing he finds in the house is like a puddle of jizz with a condom in the middle of it. Like, I mean, the hints are there. The hints are there, Tim.
But one of the strange things is people seem like way too willing to just kind of like dive into all the gross stuff in the house. Like, there's so much stuff, like people are like touching and peeling and putting their hands in things, where like there's so much of this house I would be like, oh man, I would need like a hazmat suit to even like approach some of the stuff they just like are touching with their hands. It's pretty gross. Yeah,
really disgusting stuff. The main plot, of course, is that his wife, who's pregnant, is still back at the old place, and he Skypes with her a couple of times, and sort of they're all lovey-dovey, and he's like, yeah, I'm fixing up this room today, I'm starting on the kitchen tomorrow, whatever. And ultimately, this mysterious young woman kind of appears, in the backyard and says hello to him, and is kind of flirting with him a little bit. He kind of smiles at her, doesn't think too much of it. But the next time she shows up, she kind of like properly advances onto him, and he invites her in, and they end up having sex, and
because he's earned it. He deserves it.
That's right. Yes, he says he's earned it. Yeah. So I mean, this is the thing. Like, there's like no reason to root for this guy. Like
No.
at this point in the movie, like he's been kind of unlikable up until this point anyway.
Mhm.
But the way because it's not even like he looks like he's struggling with the temptation or anything like that. He's just kind of like, yeah, I've earned this. Yeah, this is a good idea. And well, because there's a moment before this where he's on Skype with his wife, and the wife he sort of cracks it. He says like, "Oh, pointing that camera down at your boobs or whatever," and she kind of like sort of looks down and just sort of says, "That's all you get until you've done the kitchen." So it kind of gives you this idea that he's kind of like frustrated or whatever. There's also kind of moments throughout the film where they reference that maybe he's got a drinking problem, because like she says, "Oh, he looks like he's been drinking again," and sees the beer lying around and stuff. But yeah, it was actually for about 2/3 of this movie, I was wondering if you were going to see the wife in the flesh, because every time we saw her, it was over Skype.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was actually almost a shock when she comes in at the end.
I mean, but like by the end, she like kind of becomes like the main character.
Well, that's
like, it's kind of like her.
Yeah, I say the end. It's actually about 2/3 through. They kind of pull this thing where CM Punk seemingly gets killed by the girl demon thing, and she comes in, and now she's the main character, kind of looking around and finding stuff. So it's
I actually think that's kind of interesting.
It's kind of a Psycho style of thing, right?
That's
where
true, yeah.
that was more halfway through, but the idea of the main character gets whacked, and then you have this new character come in and kind of investigate after the fact. It can work.
It's kind of weird that he is like very unlikable, because he has all that stuff. He's like, pretty quick to cheat, and then like kind of keep bringing up the fact that he kind of has a shady business past, which I think later you find out that he like stole people's retirements or something like that. They allude to something along those lines.
And he has a friend who comes by eventually to help him like sort of do repairs and stuff. And like it kind of accentuates like how much of a half-assed sort of guy he is, because he comes in and says, well, where's your tools? And he's got like this one little like bag with a hammer and like a screwdriver in it. He's like, wait, you're going to renovate a house with just that? So it kind of shows his attitude towards things. But his friend kind of catches him like threatening the girl, because the girl is kind of showing up, and he's like, no, you can't come around here anymore. This is like my house where my wife and child are going to be. We had a one night thing, that's all it is. And he kind of like threatens her and tells her to go away, and the friend's kind of like, hey, you were just threatening some woman, like this is weird. I'm friends with your wife, like how am I supposed to like just ignore this? So he's kind of thoroughly unlikable.
Which I guess, I mean, I don't know if that's kind of the point, though, if it's like, well, we're going to kill him, 2/3 of the way through, so maybe you don't want to like him too much. I don't know. Yeah,
it's an interesting tactic. I don't know if it ever gets to the point, though, where you're excited about him dying, though. Like, it's kind of this weird murky middle ground. There's a really funny bartender character, actually, who he goes out for a drink at one point, and the bartender... Like, it sounds like he's going to be homophobic, because he starts to ask him if he was gay, and he's like, no, I'm married, and he kind of goes on to say, oh no, I mean, I'm not judging, I'm woke, but I think he actually says that at one point. So weird character in that guy, but I mean, whatever, some cookie surroundings, no harm.
It feels like a little strange though, because so much of the movie is focused on the house. It seems like a little weird anytime they're outside of it.
Yeah, it only happens a few times, but it is kind of weird when it does happen, yeah. Some of the actual deaths and stuff, though, are pretty good, where I did get confused at one point, though, because the girl, there's like another like ghost girl going around that's got a really sort of mangled face, and I wasn't sure if it was meant to be the same person as the other girl, because it feels like they're in a scene at the same time at one point.
Yeah, that's a little strange.
But... what is what it is. But yeah, some of the deaths are pretty good.
What confused me is like, why did he eat the marble? I still don't get that.
Oh yeah, explain the marble. Describe the marbles.
There's like throughout the movie you kind of see like marbles, kind of just like what do you call it? Like just rolling out from like under doors or different parts of the house, and ultimately you find out that they're, I guess, coming from this girl with like the mangled face, I guess, she's supposed to be younger, so it seems like she's a kid, and she must have played with marbles or whatever. But I don't know exactly like the significance of them, because at one point, CM Punk finds one and he picks it up and he eats it. Like, why?
I think he's under the spell of the house at this point. I don't.
I guess.
Yeah, it's not super clear why he does that.
It's just it's such like a very strange scene, just like the way it, because he's looking at the marble and it gets like very, very, like the music starts getting very intense, and then he just pops in his mouth, and it's just like the music stops. It's like, oh, it's like, huh, okay.
Yeah, the music really ramps up at some points in this movie. Actually, it stuck out to me as being kind of in my face a little bit at times.
But it does end up becoming kind of a cool scene later on, though, when the marble appears to be going throughout his body, and he has like a box cutter trying to get it out, so that is cool. But
yeah, that's one of the more horror orientated scenes. There's definitely stuff, because when the friend dies as well in the basement, and he gets kind of like dragged down the stairs and stuff like that. Yeah. We even get like a face being ripped off at one point. Like, there's a lot of,
I thought that was cool. Yeah,
that was a really good visual effect. I'll give them that, or I say visual effect, practical effect, maybe more to the point, which is good. I will say the wife is a better actress, or better actor than CM Punk is. So when she showed up, it was like, okay, she's a little bit better at the very least. But
I actually liked rooting for her. Like, I wanted to see her survive.
Yeah, well, she is pregnant. It's a really quick way to get some sympathy. So she's running around pregnant with this ghost kind of after her. They do this thing at the end, though, where like they do that final moment where they just wanted to have this one weird scare, because it makes no sense why she would still move into this house, even though she wins and kind of like survives.
I thought that was strange.
Yeah, she still moves into the house with her baby, and it's also they can have this final moment where the baby's in the crib and the camera goes up to this like grate in the vent in the ceiling, and you see CM Punk sort of look through it and say like hello baby girl or something like that. Like he has like a creepy dad line. And it's like, okay, so creepy CM Punk ghost is now in the house, watching over his family.
And does he drop like a marble down from the grate or something?
Oh, I don't remember if he drops a marble from the grate.
Maybe I could be wrong, or confusing it with another scene.
There's a lot of marble stuff going on in the movie, though. A lot of marbles.
So let's try to unpack the story, because I think I might be like a little confused about it. So you have this brothel. Back in the, I don't know if they gave a specific time frame, but I was assuming like 40s, 50s ish probably time.
Yeah, I was thinking Prohibition era, maybe.
Yeah. That makes sense. And then, so I was trying to think of how many floors there are, because.
Well, actually, this is one of my thoughts as I was watching the movie. For a movie called The Girl on the Third Floor, I felt like we never saw her on the third floor.
And so essentially the third floor, I guess, is because they find out in the bedroom there's like a big hole above the beds where there's like another floor where people can kind of watch and look down at the beds, and that ends up being because that's where people would have sex or do whatever they're doing, and you'd have a group of people watching from up top.
It was a show, and she describes the horrible like first time she had to do this with everyone watching. Yeah, and all that.
So the girl who we think is the girl on the third floor is like the main ghost, which I think is Sarah. But yeah, like you said, essentially she would never be on the third floor. She would be on the second floor, which is where people would be watching her. But then the ghost with like the kind of like mangled, cut up face, was she on the third floor?
I guess she was. I was kind of confused if she was the same person, though. If Sarah and the mangled girl was the same person.
So that's what I'm trying to unpack, because I think they mentioned something about how there was a girl that was missing, and I think they said like the cops didn't want to do anything because it was a girl from a brothel, and then I wasn't sure, so I'm assuming that's the girl, but then I wasn't sure if it's the same girl as Sarah, or if it was like a girl she was looking out for, or even if it was like her daughter or something. I think that's where I was a little confused about.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we didn't mention actually is that before she kills or makes Don kill himself by Oh, but the marbles get into his skin, and he tries to cut them out, and that he ends up killing himself by accident. Before that, he actually kills her when he thinks she's still just a person and she won't go away and leave him alone. He murders her. So he's actually like a murderer. He's trying to cover up his adultery by murdering the woman. Now, admittedly, she is kind of trespassing a lot and like harassing him, but still not justifying some murder. So he murders it. And he actually puts her in the wall. He tries to like, plaster her into the wall so that she'll be, hidden forever. But obviously it doesn't take because she's not really alive anyway.
Do you think all this, let's say like everything in the movie, like, him having the sex and murdering and everything, are we supposed to believe that this is just him? Because he certainly is an asshole. So I don't know if this is kind of stuff that you would put past him, or does the house have kind of an influence on him? Because I forget, doesn't the neighbor lady, doesn't she say something like about how the house will test you, like if you go in there with certain attributes or something, it might enhance it or whatnot. I forget.
Yeah, she said it would test you, and if you're not at peace of mind or you're not a good person, it would it would break you or something like that. Which I guess, because it says that it punishes men, it punishes bad men. So theoretically, if he was a fine person, he would be okay. Why it puts Liz? I guess Liz still gets tested when she goes in.
I mean, what it seemed like at that point is, like, I feel like maybe the ghost was jealous of her because, she's like this, nice girl that, like, is going to have a baby and, no one's going to question it, versus where, because she had to, either grow up or live or be around, this kind of place, a lot of people judged her and didn't look at her as, being like, like an actual person. That was kind of the gist I got of it. But I'm not sure if that's accurate.
Yeah.
Because like the way she kind of like looks at her and asks her about the baby, like, when's the baby due and stuff, and she seems like very like jealous of her. But
yeah, and Ghost Dawn does kind of try and help here at this point. We got Ghost Dawn shows up, which is fine, whatever. But Sarah's past is kind of murky. Sarah gets murdered, and no one seemed to care. That was kind of her big thing, is that none of the men who came to visit her ever, or were obsessed with her, ever seemed to care or try and figure out what happened to her. They just kind of accepted she was gone. So that's kind of that's the driving motivation for her. But it's funny because I feel like this backstory is really like specific and really dark, and then the movie is kind of a series of gags of like jizz, like hitting people in the face and people putting their hand in like wall anuses and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
yeah, I feel like I think there are some interesting ideas here. Like I think maybe it would have been better if like they did have like the whole family like moving in at the same time, and then you can kind of see the parallels between him spiraling and her like not kind of seeing the same things. And I don't know, I feel like something like that might be a little more interesting, because the idea of this kind of place and like, oh, like it hates men, and here's a guy who's not been the best, but he's trying to change and turn his life around. I mean, it sounds very Shining-esque, but that definitely could be a lot more interesting or compelling.
Yeah, I think what bugged me is that the neighbour seems to know far too much about the rules of this curse, because she flat out tells her this is how you end the curse. You have to choose to go in willingly, and you have to end the curse. And she ends up doing so by like finding the real dead body of Sarah, and they give it like a burial. And I'm like, why did you know all this? Like, where did you get this information? Why do you know all these rules?
Yeah, no, it's pretty messed up too, because it's like, well, all right, like people got to be tested or whatever, but I don't know. I feel like his death is kind of on her. Like, she could have been a lot more clear of like, hey, you should leave, and or else, you could potentially die here.
Yeah, I'm not really sympathetic towards them, but there is maybe an argument to say that maybe if someone like didn't put him in a position where he was like some ghost was trying to tempt him, might maybe have because I mean the absolute worst in him comes out for sure. Like he is despicable throughout the entire thing, and maybe that's the point, is that he was always that anyway. But
yeah, or at least maybe try to give a better warning to his friend. Like, he doesn't deserve it. Like, if Don's gonna die, fine, but yeah, his friend doesn't need to do that to die either.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. He seems quite nice. He seems quite friendly. He seems like he's not deserving of death, but he does get killed just because he's there, just because he's associated with him. It's because it's after he doesn't agree to hide it from Sarah, or from Liz. Sorry, he just kind of like doesn't definitively like fight Don on it, and I think maybe that's what seals his fate, because he doesn't try and stop him or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of murky. Honestly, like the plot's actually surprisingly convoluted for the backstory. In a way that it might just because of how it's told rather than because it's actually that complicated. But because of that, it feels overbearing, which is weird because honestly, like, we're having trouble remembering all of it because it wasn't really that it didn't really strike a chord with us. What struck a chord with us was the goofy stuff of marbles being eaten and jizz pools and jizz showers and like other bodily fluids like coming out of wall sockets and just all these more goofy elements. And then maybe you might also have gotten a bit of a nasty shot from the dog death. And
I was not happy about that.
and the tumble dryer. So like the movie, like everything that's memorable about the movie has nothing to do with what the plot is, to the point where I watched it 2 days ago and I'm sitting here thinking about it and I'm like, I'm struggling to remember like what the motivations were. I had to really think about it. I had to think about what the brothel was. I had to think about what the motivations for Sarah was, and it wasn't something that stuck. It's not like other movies where the twist or the reveal are maybe the most memorable thing about it, where you're like, oh, remember that moment in X movie where we found out why this was all really happening. In this movie, it's just like, okay, generic backstory that's dark. And
it's kind of funny is I actually watched this like pretty early. Like, I watched it last Tuesday, and we're recording on Sunday, and normally I don't like to watch stuff that early, but I had a lot of stuff this week that I thought like, all right, well, I have some people coming over on Wednesday, and then Thursday I'm gonna have to go to the movies, and then Saturday night we have a wedding reception. So this might be the only time I get to watch this, and then of course everything gets canceled because of the virus outbreak. So I didn't need to watch it that early, but no, you're right. Like, there's stuff I'm trying to remember. Like, wait, did that happen, or why was that, or but I think it's a good point you bring up though, because it is kind of like at odds with itself, where there's some like goofy, crazy, silly stuff, and like it does feel like it's trying to go for an Evil Dead vibe, which that potentially could have been fun. If you just focus on more of the house jizz and that kind of stuff. But then, once you get into this like very convoluted, dark backstory, it kind of loses the momentum, and makes it seem like just a different movie that you're not as into.
Yeah, I think partly because it doesn't really do much with it for the first like hour, and then all of a sudden it gives you this barrage of like stuff. Is just right before Dawn dies, is like that's where it really starts to pick up a lot of this mythology stuff and just starts going head first into it. And it feels like at that point it's just drifting away from like the movie that it kind of had been up until that point, which I guess I get the idea of having the shift, but the problem is that like the first half, any enjoyment I was getting was with how silly it was, even though it didn't feel like it didn't feel like the movie was like trying to actually achieve the right tone to match the silliness, but I was at least getting entertainment value out of how silly it was. And then by the time I got to the part where it's okay, we have to actually care about how serious the plot is now and care about what happened in this brothel and what happened, and root for Liz to sort of get away with this and get out alive and defeat Sarah or defeat the curse or whatever. Once it gets to that point, I'm like, I still don't care about the plot of this movie. Like, I just don't. So unfortunately, I think it's a really, I don't even know if I'd call it mediocre. I'd say it's kind of funny bad for like half the movie, and then it's just bad after that. With some good practical effects. That is the caveat, that there is some good practical effects in some of the kills.
Um, I think I'm slightly more positive than you, but I wouldn't go like that far. Um, it is kind of a bummer because this was one I was looking forward to. I just like I didn't know much about it or the people involved, but I just kind of thought the trailer looked good, and I heard some decent buzz about it. Um, Ultimately, though, I don't think it's horrible, but it's definitely not good or great. I think there's at least enough like good special effects and like gore and kills and stuff that's kind of cool. And um, again, like it's not like a super compliment or anything, but I just feel like nowadays my attention is like all over the place, and there's so many bad movies that we watch that like if I'm not bored while watching it, I do consider that kind of an achievement. So I will give it that credit to that. Like I was never really bored as I was watching it, at least.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. What are you giving it then?
I think I'm gonna go right down the middle. I'm gonna give it a 5. Yeah, unfortunately, there's some bad acting, and the story starts off interesting, but ends up not being great. But I think there is enough there to, at least justify, a little bit of like, watching it. Like, yeah, I would, especially it's on Netflix, it's streaming right now, so it's easy to see. So, yeah, with the effects and the kills and everything, it was mildly entertaining for me. But yeah, I can't really go too much higher than that and actually say that it was that good.
No, that's fair. I think I'm a bit more negative on it because I do think the acting is really bad from some of them, and I think what accentuates that is how bad the dialogue is. The dialogue is particularly rough, and it really accents everything that I've said about the acting. And while I do think there's actually one practical effect that I kind of want to criticize a little bit. It looks good kind of on its own, but it doesn't make much sense. Is when Milo, Don's friend, right, when he gets killed, he's in the basement, he finds Sarah down there. She has him with a hammer, right? And I can't believe I haven't mentioned the hammer yet, because I was kind of joking throughout the movie when I was watching it, like just how much this hammer kept coming back up. Right. But she has some of this mallet, and it felt like she sort of swung at him like a normal sort of person would, you know what I mean, like just sort of swung at him kind of like across the way. But when you see the makeup job they've done on him, he's got like a hole as if she hit him like right in the eye, as if she like buried it into his eye. And I'm like, that, I mean, it looks good, like the makeup job, but it doesn't really fit with what the action was before it, so that stuck out to me.
That's a good point.
Because it was kind of funny watching him like crawl around with this big hole in his eye, like cause it was quite big. It was like this big.
Yeah. No, that did look cool, but yeah, I didn't even put that together. That it doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, in fact, that's the first time you find the mangled ghost girl. Because that's the first time you see her. It's just before he dies. But yeah, so there we go. I'll give it a 4, because I will say this: as much as I don't think it's a good movie, but all the weird jizz haunting stuff at least is ridiculous enough to be funny. And there's a couple of good practical effects, so it's not a complete lost cause. And if you're watching it with people, you can have a chuckle about how silly some of it is. But I can't really recommend it that much beyond that. So that's what it is.
Yep.
That's what it is. So that is Girl on the Third Floor. You can, of course, let us know what you think of the movie in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. You can get us on the Twitters at Screams Midnight, of course, and you can support the show by rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars and a review. Helps where people find us. We mentioned earlier, of course, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support us financially. So go have a look at that and see if you're interested. Otherwise, check out the content that MailFuzz TV offers you. We have a science fiction movie podcast called The Atomic Cinema Experiment that I do with Tara. Kind of like this one. It's every week. Go check that out. Kind of interesting. But yeah, so go and have a look at the various other things we do, and that is us. Why are you smirking at me?
Oh, I don't know.
Tim's smirking at me. He's throwing me off my outro. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys, and we will see you next time.